I promise I will talk about this topic, but because of some conversations I had yesterday, I feel I ought to also just start off here talking just briefly about what we've done in the last year at a terribly practical level. And the reason that I want to do this is I've had several people come up to me and say, how did you do X? And over the last 3 years, we've gradually learned more and more about HUBzero, but we're still learning lots of things. So I would like to feel that perhaps if people are watching this on the internet, or if you have some basic questions, I was just going to touch on some of the things that we had learned or built that might be important, and then we'll swing back to HUBzero or SpokeZero. Oh, that looks all right. Okay, I'm going to start off with tickets. Now, Mike mentioned that as well, but this is just sort of a general observation for everyone here and out on the internet. When we first got involved with HUBzero, I spotted a bug, and I was really quite embarrassed about that. I thought, should I tell them? They're busy people. No, I'm not sure if I should mention this. But eventually, I did file a bug on it, and the sense of power absolutely went to my head. We now file bugs like there's no tomorrow. We're regularly the top of a list, and the HUBzero team have said, for God's sake, stop that. So, because we are completely out of control, I strongly encourage you to try and knock us off the leaderboard. Filing bugs is fun, it gives you a certain amount of exercise, but the point is that because we know so little about HUBzero, particularly one of my colleagues is astonishing at finding bugs. Turns out if you click on this thing 7 times, the database falls over. Who knew? Well, in this case, Julia did. So I just mentioned, in case anyone feels a little bit reticent about it, the HUBzero team love coming in the morning and seeing new tickets about things that are broken. So bring happiness to their lives, knock us off the leaderboard. The next thing, just a little bit I want to talk, for people who might be new about this, how do we manage our hubs? Now, we run all of our stuff on the Amazon web stack. We love it. We haven't tried other virtualization stacks, so it's not necessarily a recommendation, but our experience about it has been really good. The problem is, though, as soon as you get more than one hub, and to be honest, if you have a hub, you have to have 2 hubs because you need a development and a live version, you start having all sorts of problems managing it. So I wanted to show you, first of all, a page that we built. It's going to look like gobbledygook, because it is. But if it's of any interest to anyone, we will gladly share the little PHP script. And I just wanted to explain what you are looking at. As you can see, over a little period of time, this has filled up as our sort of catch-all page of where are we going to put the instructions on how to do a git commit. I know, we'll stick them on that page. It makes no sense. But on the left-hand side of the screen, this may be too small for you to see, but I'll explain. There is the list of all the hubs that we're running. So we've currently got 7, I think. Next to that, there's the status of the live and the development version of those hubs, the version of the operating system it's running, its current load level, so it's pulling from top, the amount of uptime it's got, the code branch, because we use Git to manage all of this, and then the current status between the 2 of them. Now, you can add other fields to it. For younger developers, I just wanted to mention, down the bottom where it's flashing dirty there, this is not a CSS transformation using JavaScript. This is semantic markup. We are bringing the blink tag back. Right? It said what it did. Exactly. It was unfairly maligned. This has proved to be hugely useful for us. And as soon as you get a hub, we recommend have something like this. The other thing I just wanted to point out is the users columns, and I'll come back to this, is really useful because if you're sitting there going, I wonder if I can reboot my hub, there's one page you go to and you can see who's logged in, and if you've got a lot of people logged in, that's the time to reboot. Always funny. But there's also down there on the pending column, are we waiting to approve anyone's account? Now, I'm not suggesting that this is the best way of doing it. It refreshes about every 10 seconds, I think, but we found it hugely useful. If you need something like this, let us know. We will gladly give you the code for doing that. If you're thinking, I've got a hub, how do I back it up? We use rsync.net. Other providers exist. Glacier, S3, all sorts of people. We have found our SIG to be excellent, and we keep the hubs up, or at least we find out if they've gone down. We use status cape for that. Again, lots of providers. We've had a lot of luck with that. And if you are using Amazon, we love the iPhone client, because your server will always crash when you are out. And it is surprisingly effective to be able to do that. Our next move on this, at the moment, we have EC2 instances. They are all, I think with the exception of one of them, might even say on the page, tiny, but one of them is now a small, I think it is. Our next move for that is to start experimenting with using the Amazon MySQL server, which they call RDS. I found a wonderful link the other day. It listed, this is what Amazon call it, this is what they should have called it. DNS server, let's call it Route 53. Yeah, I'm not thinking. But anyway, I will find that page and we'll stick it up on the hub, because I found it very useful. Their RDS server is their MySQL server, and we're going to experiment with what happens if we make the hubs all the smallest ones and try and offload it onto MySQL. Might be a good idea, might not. We will see. So that's how we manage our stuff. More than happy to talk more about it. Like most people who run hubs, we discovered we had quite a problem with spam. If you have yet to experience the joys of that, it is coming, I guarantee you. The spammers are very clever. They seem to find our DNS records because they jump from hub to hub. You see the same person trying to create the accounts and set it all up. So I just wanted to mention, first of all, when people spam you, it can be hard to find. We found one spammer who had very cleverly gone into the wiki and re-edited all of the help pages. I thought, wow, you thought about that quite a lot in order to get there. So it's all over the place. The only way we discovered it was by looking at, they have a sort of accounting service which keeps hitting the server. We look at the log files, see where they're going, and go, oh, they found a new place to put it. So you need to be aware of that. We did two things on this, and this was one of the first things that I wanted to mention as an improvement that you may not be aware of. When you set up registration for users, there was an option that said self-approve, approve via an email link, or only do it via admin. That only allowed the admin there was a comedy entry. It didn't actually do anything. And then we noticed it didn't do anything, and after a certain amount of gentle encouragement, the HUBzero guy said, yeah, all right, we'll make it do something. So we turned that on for all of our hubs now, which was why that column on the status page about pending is really useful. So now the registration loop, where it's open registration, if someone comes in, registers, it says, we'll be back to you real soon now. It appears on our sheet. We go and have a look. If it's a .edu, we normally let them straight through. A lot of people, though, use surprisingly odd Gmail addresses, and so we then go and look them up, and you find, oh, no, actually it is a NASA researcher. All right, in you come. But that has done a lot for us in terms of cutting down our spam. Obviously, if you have hundreds of people registering on your site a day, first of all, congratulations. Secondly, it might not work for you. But that's, for small hubs that we run, that's worked really well. There is a problem, though. When we implemented this, we then discovered that the spammers got cross with us. Because they would register, we would kill their account instantly. So they DDoSed us. And this was, if you're not familiar with it, distributed denial of service attack. And this confused us hugely because we're running a hub on this. There is no commercial value, but off they went and DDoSed us. So this was a great example of using Amazon Web Services. It wasn't a huge DDoS. It wasn't like, it was like, so they DDoSed us a bit. So we turned it up to 11, and they DDoSed us a bit more, so we put on a bigger instance, and eventually we out-instanced them. But they were still hammering us. And a couple of points to note on this. First of all, we were not running something called fail to ban. If you don't run this on your server, go and install it immediately. Basically what it looks at is you set up some rules, you say these kind of IP requests are invalid, and you then ban people, we ban them permanently. It's hugely useful. But the other thing I wanted to mention on that is that we then collected a whole bunch of IP addresses, and we thought, okay, we better add these to our other servers because they will go to them now. Next, what we're thinking though, if this is of use to anyone, is we'll bundle them all up, put them in a Git repo, and then as a very first start, if you were setting up a new hub, go and pull this repo and populate your failed ban. Obviously, it's not all of the zombies. It did amuse me. When I wrote this down, I thought, I love tech conferences. I can legitimately put down a phrase, Git repo of zombie IPs. Yeah, this is just ridiculous, but that's exactly what it is. But then the other thing about the Git repo on this is we could all go and start harvesting our failed ban lists, do pull requests, and we'll gradually build up a sort of a list of likely candidates. Obviously, it won't solve the problem completely, but it might be a useful step. So we're happy to start. User registration. I wanted to mention this because, again, Mike was talking about all sorts of wonderful features yesterday. This was a tiny one, but it's hugely useful if you need it. You can now bulk register people. Now, that was important for us as a second approach to trying to get round spam. In a lot of our hubs, when we're running groups, we know who it is who's coming. So we built a little Google spreadsheet. You pop it in, it generates a CSV file for you, suck it in, everyone is registered. It's really neat, and there were a couple of things that we wanted to identify that. I put down the ORCID ID, by the way. I wasn't sure. I have an agreement with Sam. If I'm going to say things, and I look at him, he goes, I go, okay, just moving over that one. That didn't quite make it into the current build. But what we've got, it's also fixed. You can now request a password reset with just your email address, not your user ID. That was important because if you bulk register people, they don't necessarily know what their username is. And so the sequence that we do with people now is you're all registered, you send them an email saying, go to this site, click, I've forgotten my password, you'll get an email, off you go. But they have to know what their username was, so now you can just do it with your email address. That's really useful. If anyone needs the Google Sheet, more than happy to give that to you. A couple of things that I don't think are in there. At the moment, I don't think you can assign people to a particular group, so you've then got to run around and dump them in there. And also, I don't think it does random password generation yet. These will undoubtedly be coming. But that made a big difference for us. This was a feature, logged in and logged out menus, that I wish to commend Sean for his insomnia on this. We wanted to, we discovered that our users were confused by the fact that when you logged in, you got taken to your dashboard. And people go, I was at this site and suddenly I'm at something completely different. Now obviously after you've done it a few times, you get the idea. But what we really wanted was a screen which said, hello, log in, and then it took you to a different screen and you stayed there. Whereas it turned out it was difficult to do that. You can now do this. And so it's useful if you have the scenario, I've registered a whole bunch of people, they know their passwords, we're running a collaboration site rather than a sort of CMS-based, this is what we're all about site, and therefore I want to pop up a login screen and we'll go from there. You can now do that. Finally, in terms of improvement, newsletters. They now work. And this is great. Yeah, exactly. It's not only that they now work, it also gets through to people, which is another added feature. And the reason that this is particularly important, let me show you this, it's working with an email service, in this case Mandrill, maybe it supports other ones. But I wanted to show you this because it comes back to what Jerry was saying yesterday about that curve and don't be in the middle. I don't think it's worth setting up and running your own SMTP gateway. If you already have one, if you're a university and you're all set up, that's fine. But this one with Mandrill is beautiful. This was a mail shot we did just a few days ago. And the thing that I wanted to point out was we turned on newsletter, we set up our Mandrill credentials, we fired it off, and then I could see exactly what was happening with that newsletter, the click-throughs, the opens, all of that is there. We didn't have to build any of that. It's not even very expensive. You know, it's a couple of lattes a month, that sort of thing. So this, to me, seems exactly the sort of place you don't want to be caught setting this up. And it's fantastic that we can do that. So the newsletters Excellent, they now work. Those are just some of the things that we've seen as improvements over time, so if you want to talk any more about that, just let me know. Okay, over to this other bit, HUBzero or SpokeZero. Pop this open. So as an organization, what we do is we organize and facilitate scientific creativity events across all of the sciences. And one of the more popular versions of this is called an Ideas Lab. And just recently, the NSF officially put it in their grants program guide, which is likely to have a few implications for it. So from our point of view, it's likely to become something which is used to address grand challenges, like there's one that's popular at the moment, the nexus of food, energy, and water. We've got big problems around there. It's a classic sort of interdisciplinary research project. We're also seeing, because it's now officially sanctioned, universities themselves are starting to take this approach of how do we do interdisciplinary approach. In fact, Purdue is doing one on 21st century agriculture, which we're helping them with. So you're seeing people run them internally. You're seeing networks of universities run them. And that, from our point of view, gives us a big problem about scaling. We're only a small organization. And in order to address it, we are now very interested in how we build capacity. And one aspect of that is how we build tools to support more effective interdisciplinary collaboration. Now, Mike, in fact, came to a couple of our events, and I think it was quite interesting because he began, I think, to understand that our events typically look like an explosion in a Post-it notes factory. You've got 40 or 50 people there, there's all sorts of ideas all over the wall, and we were running hubs to support that. There's one big data hub, bdhub.info, where you'll see some of this. And the hub tools sort of worked, but didn't quite fit for a number of reasons, and I'll show you what we mean. But this was really useful for us because it was the first time we were really trying to use the hubs as a way of supporting the activities in real time. So along with my colleagues, we went away and we sat down and we said, okay, what sort of tools do we really need? And given that we're beginning to understand HUBzero, how might we go about building them? Because we like HUBzero and it's a great platform. And these are some of the sorts of things that we do. And in fact, on the community building side, there are a couple of things which are worth talking about. Skills mapping. When you're trying to encourage interdisciplinary science, you've got an interesting search problem. You're not looking for people who are like you. You're looking for the person who is least like you, but still interested in this topic. Because what we're trying to do is to promote conversations that would not otherwise happen. And so we need to be able to take the skills that people identify and to be able to map that network and say, okay, you guys are furthest apart from each other. And then we start doing things like RCTs, which in this case stands for randomized coffee trials, where we will invite people to go off prior to a meeting and say, go and have a conversation about such and such a thing. Now, none of this is very complicated, but it does mean that we need tools to let us map and manipulate networks. And so we have to be able to build that in. We also need to be able to support meandering discussions, where people are going to be talking about a wide range of things, and somehow we have to bring them back together every so often. And likewise, there's brainstorming and drawing and those sorts of things. And eventually, when you get down to projects, you've got project management questions. And even on the research side, you've got people want to integrate with things like Mendeley or bring Watson in to analyze all of the ideas. So there's a whole bunch of tools that we realized we wanted to be able to build. But the question was, how are we going to build them? So when we were thinking about this, we thought, well, there are various approaches that we could use. Obviously, we could code it up with PHP and build it all into the hub, and that's an approach. But the thing that keeps coming back to me, a chap called Bill Joy, who was at Sun, very clever guy, and one of the things that he's known for is Joyce Law of whoever you are, the smartest people are working for someone else, which is always worth bearing in mind. And I think there's a sort of corollary to that, which is whatever platform you're using, the cool kids and the interesting stuff is always being written in something else, probably Haskell and with monads and all the rest of it. So we've got a problem about this. And the reason why I felt this was a particular problem was every morning I wake up and discover that the internet overnight has produced yet more awesome. It's just fantastic. The first time I read about people with Enscripten, which is this cross-compiler from C into JavaScript, and they were taking things like the Qt library and cross-compiling it, and it actually ran. And you just thought, this is barking mad, but my God, that's clever. And so it's just chock full of awesome. And the problem is that our experience is we see these little bubbles of awesome happening maybe in computer science departments in universities, and then they go out into the internet and people do all sorts of crazy things with them. But it's often years before it comes back into the biology department in the building next door, or those sorts of things. We just don't have a route which brings awesome back into academic collaboration fast enough. And this is disappointing, but everybody wants awesome. So the question was, how might we get things like this into a HUBzero kind of environment faster? And I'll show you just a few examples of things that currently excite us, purely as indicators, if you haven't seen them. Obviously, we all know Google Docs. It's terribly clever. I've got something here called WeCan, which is, if any of you have used Trello, it's an open source version of that. And we're looking at folding that into projects, because that would be really useful. Let me just pop over to a browser for a moment. And I wanted to show you this thing, which is called Substance, or it's a version of it. Now this is a word processor, sort of. It's kind of a word processor assembly kit. But what's so amazing about it, I mean, it's beautiful and it works as you would expect, but it also does your citation management in there. It will allow you to go and add new references to it, to immediately stick the references into your document, to format it into APA, to do whatever style you use. And the reason this is so important is, obviously we could all go and use Google Docs, it's great, but it's not quite what we want for what we're trying to do. But people are building it. And so the question is, how do we bring this into our own environment? Likewise, if we have a look, there's a tool here, which I'm only bringing up because it's a single instance of something which I think is brilliant. It's a tool, it's called minutes.io, and it is a tool specifically for capturing the minutes in a meeting. And they have done it beautifully. You can put in the type of action you're after. You're saying this is a decision, this is a things to do, this is who's going to do it. It will integrate with your calendar. It emails people a list of what they agreed to. Now, there's nothing particularly clever about that, but you imagine taking that kind of capability and popping it into a project, let's say, because that's the sort of thing we need to do. Someone has built this, it's awesome, it's available. And if we want to go at higher levels of awesome, do any of you know Lively Kernel, like Lively Web? Have you ever heard of this? All right, so Dan Ingalls, who was one of the guys behind Smalltalk, truly the greatest language ever, decided that he wanted to implement Smalltalk and stuff onto the web. And so they built this thing, which is just incredible. It's this collaboration environment, but everything in it is live. So I can go here and pick up a parts bin, and you could imagine all sorts of parts, and I can, depending on the speed of performance, I might be able to pull one of these out, pop down there, and obviously if you've got a star you need a triangle, pull that out, and, well, if I stick the two on and then I move it, it stays sticky, and if I grab a pen and pull that out, maybe, yeah, there we go. And then suddenly you find you can draw over your entire canvas. Not necessarily the sort of thing you would write papers about, but the point is this is all implemented in JavaScript. It's available as a collaborative environment, and you could build parts to do anything. You could imagine the conversations where you're pulling in parts about molecules and saying, this is what we want to do, and somebody else says, fine, I'll save that as a snapshot, and let's annotate it in this sort of way. These are the kind of tools which are so far ahead of what we have become used to in terms of the web that we deserve them. we need to have these sorts of tools because they are awesome. And likewise, if you're not a Smalltalk advocate, then IPython networks, notebooks rather, all of that sort of thing, we should be looking at how we fill them in. But there's this practical question of, so how do we get from here to there? How do we actually do that? And how do we actually get that sort of technology built into the hub? And we were thinking about it, we say, okay, we could wrap it up in PHP. I've been deeply impressed with what's in 2.0 already. People are building all sorts of fantastic stuff. We've got the Rapture toolkits, and so the geodata mapping stuff yesterday, absolutely superb. We need much more of that. The new version of the hub may ship with Node because you've got hub graph. It's nodding from the back. So this gives us another way to integrate things. If you're not using Node, it gives you sort of an alternative platform. Last year I showed how we have a chat window in it and stick the two things together. All right, that's another way we could do it. However, there are other thoughts we can have about this. We could say, if there's all this awesome out there, maybe we should forget having a hub. And of course, this is the way the vast majority of the scientific community work. They sort of glue together other tools. They have Google Docs and Trello, and they email each other's log on, and you add people as users, and you just have this sort of network of tools that you use. And it works. It's okay. There are all sorts of concerns we have, though, about the data, about the reliability, about how you bring more people on. And if you go back to some of the things we need to do in terms of being able to map a community, and be able to say, who is it who's interested in this space, what do we know about them, how do we communicate with them, then this sort of loose network doesn't help us so much. So I don't dismiss that, and there will be elements of it. We don't need to build Mandrill into our system in order to do the email transaction. Someone has already done that. But I think there is a third approach, which is to sort of focus on the hub and embrace the network and say, how do we bring some of these pieces together? Until recently, the hard part about doing that was seamlessness. Now, obviously, you've got OAuth as a possibility, and when you sort of link into another service and you log in and then it records that, and it can work okay. But still, the data are stored somewhere else. And if you want to run HubGraph to search it, you go, now, wait a minute, where did all this information go? I thought Mike talked just now about the practical realities of data, and searching for it is a wonderful reminder to us all of, yeah, it's easy in theory, it's just when you get down to the practicalities, it goes horribly wrong. So, I wanted to show you some experiments that are half-baked and poorly implemented. I always think it's important to set the expectations at the right level here. But they might give us a clue about ways forward. So, this is a development. Oh, something went wrong. Good. That's always encouraging, isn't it? Just talk amongst yourselves. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Control-Alt-Delete. Actually, could I have the 2.1 patch just applied? Still got a network, doesn't it? That's working. Yeah. Just try that. There we go. Okay. That, by the way, was just the example of how you can have two different pages when you're logged out and logged in. Here's what I want to do, though. On our development machine, go over to our labs page. Now, I have a secret collaborator in the audience. What we have done here is, this is a word processor a little bit like Google Docs, but it is not. That secret collaborator can respond if they wish. But the point that I want to make is, if you have a look, on the left-hand side of the screen, my username is CMS manager. And demo user is also there. I didn't log into this external service, even though it is. And the magic through which all of my credentials are being sent to this external server is highlighted down here. It's something called JWT, JSON Web Tokens. And this is a really interesting idea. What happens is, with external servers, they have a secret. We all have secrets, but they have a secret. And I encrypt a little package of data which says, this is my user's name, this is their access control level, this is the group that they're in, and I pop that back via the user. The user then submits that to this service seamlessly. Service decrypts it. As long as it decrypts it correctly, then they then have the sort of profile to use. Now, this is a relatively new approach, but it's taking a lot of popularity, gaining a lot of popularity, which means that we can start to build tools where we control the user group in terms of they log in and they register and we manage them via a hub, but we can start to build in all sorts of capabilities without worrying about how we do the authentication, because there's a good and secure way of doing it. Equally, just as an example, this is another one. The point about it is, all of these tools, I got my children to draw this, honest. All of these sorts of tools, you might just be able to see next to my cursor it says admin, so it knows who I am. All of these tools are live, they're real time, and they're being organized just via these JWTs. Let me show you just one last example on this, which is video conferencing. And possibly my secret assistant might be able to turn on their video conference. Or in fact, I'll tell you what, just make sure I've silenced this. There we go. The identity of the secret administrator is about to be revealed. Who knew? Actually, everyone did. I mean, those pesky kids. So the point about this is this video conferencing, which again, we're just folding in to this. In fact, it's WebRTC. But we were able to drop this in here. We can do the authentication. There are various services that might offer this. This is a terribly simple version. But on another development hub, we're running a version which also has an iPhone client and these sorts of things. So we're at a place where the internet's producing constant source of awesome. JWT is one route through which we could fold it in, manage the user relationship, the credentials, all of that side inside the hub, and be able to hold the data in the hub, maybe just squirting it out to a service if we want them to do some transformation for us, and then pull it back in. So we're really very optimistic about being able to do that. Thank you, secret assistant. All right. In the -2 minutes that I've got left, let me just do where next. So we have thoughts on this. First of all, let me just ask, for sort of video conferencing and the collaborative editing, is this of any interest to anyone other than us? Oh, all right. Okay, then that's good. Didn't matter, but you know, it's nice to know. We need to take poorly implemented ideas and actually figure out how do we turn them into plugins, and we were waiting for 2.0 to see if we could get that to work. So we will do that. But it also makes us wonder about what the HUBzero Foundation might want to do. When we run events, for instance, we're always terribly keen to try and run them at universities rather than hotels, because we like to try and recycle the NSF's money back into the university system. In order to run a video conferencing system of more than, say, 4 or 5 people, you need something called an SFU, which I always think sounds vaguely rude, but it's actually a selective forwarding unit. And so it's a big machine that handles video streams. Maybe, I do not speak for the HUBzero Foundation, but maybe there are opportunities for HUBzero to say, yeah, actually we will, because we're moving to Amazon Stacks, we might run one of these for you. It might be a competence we want to develop. So there are services you can imagine being added to that. Equally, as we move towards environments of sort of micro-execution, the Amazon guys didn't mention Lambda yesterday, but there is this move towards being able to fire off little requests into the cloud, get an answer back on a micro basis. Maybe there are interesting opportunities there. Our objective is absolutely, we want academia to be on the cutting edge of awesome. There is no reason why we shouldn't be. We should be using the greatest tools that anyone creates, and we should be then figuring out all the interesting research questions around that. And we've talked about HUBzero, we've talked about SpokeZero. I just wanted to finish with just this. Now, when I first got involved here, some years ago, I was whittering on about 3D environments, and we run one for a creative collaboration. In the intervening time, that kind of capability has now come to HTML. This is not, and I would not wish to pretend, yet integrated with HUBzero, but this is what we want to do. We want to have a Hub 3D, and we want to be able to explore, for instance, our resource worlds and say, yeah, okay, now, I'm not good at Pac-Man at all, as you were about to see, but it is quite incredible what the 3D engines allow us to do. Now, haha, bring it on, you ghost. Now, okay, and with that, I'm coming out of here. So that's what we're looking at. We want to bring a 3D environment to the Hub as a model of collaboration, wrapped in with video conferencing, and building these tools to support real-time and asynchronous creative collaboration. And then after lunch. Questions? Thoughts? Sorry, Mike, I'm over time.
Questions for Andy?
Just a quick FYI for the members importer. Group assignment is in there 2.0.
Woohoo! Thank you.
That's the same question you asked me yesterday. When will this be available?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's so when would we have the plugins done? We need them, so I'm hoping the next month or so we'll have it packaged up. I know that we'll need to. We have signed the contributor agreement with HUBzero, so it shouldn't be a problem. But of course, we can host it on our own external Git repo as well. So I will make sure that you know. And I don't know, what is the mechanism for letting the community know? It's email list? Or? We need a hub. Yeah, newsletter. Yeah. Of course, I can't get it in my mind. Okay, with that, oh, hang on. You need this back.
Yeah, I'll take that too.
Thank you.